I acknowledge that the land the City of Ann Arbor occupies is the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of the Anishinaabe, including Odawa, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi and Wyandot peoples. I further acknowledge that our city stands, like almost all property in the United States, on lands obtained generally in unconscionable ways from Indigenous peoples. The taking of this land was formalized by the Treaty of Detroit in 1807. Knowing where we live, work, study, and recreate does not change the past, but a thorough understanding of the ongoing consequences of this past can empower us in our work to create a future that supports human flourishing and justice for all individuals.
Thanks, Aaron. Will you do the roll call now?
Yes. Councilmember Ackman.
Here, Ann Arbor.
Vice Chair Brown.
I'm here in Ann Arbor.
Chairperson Curtis.
Here, Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Dale.
Here, Ann Arbor.
Councilmember Dish will be a little bit late. Commissioner Graham.
I'm here. Thank you.
Commissioner Gruber.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Marson.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Mirsky.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Mitchell.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Nedrich.
Here in Ann Arbor.
New Commissioner Peters Wood.
Here, Ann Arbor.
Thank you. New Commissioner Smith.
Here in Ann Arbor.
And Commissioner Wahing.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Thank you.
So I think we will meet the quorum requirements. Next is the agenda. Does anybody want to make changes to the agenda? Not, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
And by Commissioner Mirsky and seconded by
Vice Chairman
Brown. All in favor of approval of the agenda? Raise your hands, say aye.
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 Looks 100%. Does anybody want to make changes to the minutes from last month's meeting? Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Seconded by Commissioner Mitchell. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
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 Okay. So next is the public comment. This is opportunity for people to speak up to 3 minutes. Please call 888-788-0099, enter meeting ID 962-0336-6543. To raise your hand, press 9. To unmute, press *6. City staff will select callers who have raised their hand one by one using the last 3 digits of their phone number. When speaking, please move to a quiet area and state your name and address at the beginning of the comments. Aaron, do we have any callers online?
I do not see any, no.
Okay. So I think the next is new members, introduction of the new environmental commissioner. So we have 2 new people joining us, new commissioners for this month, Olivia Smith and Hank Peters Wood. So I asked them each to do a short, just a verbal introduction of themselves. Olivia, would you like to start? And you're on mute.
Happens every time. My name's Olivia. I am from Chelsea, Michigan, but I came here for school. So I've been living in Ann Arbor for 7 years now. I went to the University of Michigan and I work in commercial due diligence right now as an environmental consultant and also do a lot of brownfield work in Southeast Michigan.
Thank you. Commissioner Peters Woods.
Hi, my name is Hank. I am currently a dual degree graduate student at the University of Michigan studying public policy and law. And I'm also working in the governor's office as a public transportation policy fellow. And I'm really excited to join the commission here.
Well, we're glad both of you are here. Thank you.
Thanks.
Next business is the comprehensive plan review by Brett Leonard. I don't
Yes.
know, Brett, you want to show your screen, or you want Aaron to show the presentation, or you want to answer the questions we sent you, or what would you like to do?
I'm happy to share the presentation. So thank you very much for having me. I would like to, I think Aaron uploaded the presentation in the packet, but I would like to go through that briefly. And then Aaron shared a few of your questions with me that I have a couple of thoughts on that we can maybe go over afterwards. And then generally, I just want to make sure that if there's any other questions, but as well, welcome your feedback, your thoughts on any of these topics. This is a great opportunity for us to hear from you and augment the wide public dialogue that we're having about this comprehensive planning process. I also, before I pull up the presentation, I want to introduce Jamie Granger. Jamie is a member of our lead consultant team, Interface Studios, who is helping us lead this work. So let me see if I can master the Zoom. Can everybody see my super exciting title slide?
Yes.
All right. Okay. So just to set the stage to make sure that we're all clear on what we're talking about the comprehensive plan. And the comprehensive plan is the city's land use policy document. It in itself changes nothing. It changes no laws, it changes no requirements, it changes no activities, but it articulates what our visions are, what our goals are, and actually puts together an implementation approach for us to achieve those goals. So it is broadly our to-do list about what we want to do going forward so that our community evolves into the community we want it to be. It looks on a long-term horizon, 20 or 30-year horizon, and this plan has been specifically directed to focus on three values: affordability, sustainability, and equity. Some of you might have heard the term master plan. It is the same document. However, we have shifted away from the terminology of master plan. That can invoke perceptions of slavery or paternalism. And it also suggests more of a sort of a finality that is not appropriate, because like a lot of other public policy documents, comprehensive plans are intended to evolve over time. So that's why you hear the term comprehensive plan used instead of master plan, if that's something you're more familiar with. Because our beloved city council is passionate and wanted to make this job even harder for the planning department, not only did they say, make sure that we're delivering a plan that is achieving a sustainable, affordable, and equitable future, but they gave us some extra goals to accomplish as well. They want us to be careful to consider and implement those portions of the A20 Living Carbon Neutrality Plan. That plan is not part of our current land use policy documents. It's obviously been adopted and invested in, but when we're talking about a comprehensive plan, it goes through a very specific process for adoption, which that plan did not do. And so this is an opportunity for us to take those portions of that plan that are really relevant to land use and integrate them into our land use policies and regulations going forward. We are a largely developed city, so make recommendations for adding new homes and densification in single family zoned areas. I'm going to have a couple of maps that show why that's really important. Develop recommendations and policies that promote fewer zoning districts or categories and contain more flexibility for reuse and adaptability over time. We are not unique as a community that our regulatory framework has grown and expanded over time. We've been zoning for 100 years here in the city, and we've gone from 7 pages in 4 zoning districts to over 300 pages in 34 zoning districts. And with that can come challenges to allow the evolution and adaptability of properties and uses in the city. We are challenged to develop a proposed land use framework that seeks to emphasize values over specified land use limitations. And that is, in short, recognizing that even over a 20 to 30 year horizon, this plan will not anticipate every evolution or need or change or decision that we're going to need to face. And what this plan is going to attempt to do is, if it can't solve all of those questions, at least provide us with a decision-making framework so that when we're faced with new challenges, be it in geography or policy, we have agreed about some of the important questions and standards that we should bring to that question so that we can collectively make that decision consistent to meet the goals that this plan identifies. And then specifically to recommend policies that undo or seek to repair past land use policies and regulations that resulted in the exclusion of people based on race, income, or other characteristics. While I have not yet found the examples of a specific zoning regulatory authority here in the city, we have definitely been involved in, as an institution, the city government, in policies that have resulted in displacement of people of color in our community. And this is an opportunity to not only make sure we don't do that in the future, but what are some land use policies that we could look at to undo some of the harms of the past? So we are largely wrapping up a lot of community engagement. We've had a lot of conversations over a lot of format, but a big piece of that was sharing some of the findings that we have found relative to our plan. So to start, our population has really slowed its growth compared to our surrounding area. Between 1970 and 2020, the county grew almost 60%. We grew almost 25%. Much more throttled growth rate, if you will. And a big part of that growth, in fact, is students at the University of Michigan. So the sort of permanent resident growth is probably even less, more of a severe difference between the surrounding area. And more recently, this is a 20-year snapshot from 2000 to 22. We are becoming a less family-friendly community. As the demographics would show us. We are having significant increases in our 65 and older population and in our college age 18 to 34 population, but our under 18 and 35 to 64 sort of household sizes, those are decreasing over that time period. Again, it's only a 20-year period, but it's showing some very specific trends about the makeup of our community going forward. And that sort of notion of being family friendly has been coming up in a lot of our engagement opportunities. We're becoming a more diverse city. The Asian and Hispanic populations are growing. The white and Black populations are declining as a percent of the total population. And 18% of the city is foreign born. So again, I think logically, that probably has a lot to do with people coming to the job center and the education center at the University of Michigan, but some shifting demographics that we need to be aware of going forward. Going specifically to population, this is just a couple of snapshots from 1960 to 2020. And the more intense colors here are the higher percentage of Black population in those geographies of the city. So on the left in 1960, you're seeing the Carytown area and what was the West Side and now is referred to as Water Hill. That was the predominant Black neighborhood in the city. You can see as of 2020, that's been dispersed through a wide variety of factors. Some of those were initiatives of the city. Some of those were economics. I am sure some of that was actually those households sort of seeking some of the same, frankly, suburbanization that a lot of people were in communities across the country. But it was clearly breaking up a cohesive neighborhood to just separate parts of the city and further out from the core of the city for sure. We talked about the impact of the university, and when we're talking about employment and jobs, it is obviously the big influence. We have 94,000 jobs in the city. 37% of those are tied to the University of Michigan. We are the fourth most economically dependent community on anchor institution employment in the country, and more than 3 times the national average. We that is from a, if I were to nerd out and go back to my planning education, the first reaction that an urban planner has to that is we should really look at diversifying our economy. You look at communities impacting like we did the loss of Pfizer, when you have so much of your economic power tied to a single industry and that industry fails or leaves, that can have a devastating impact on the community. I don't think that's as much of a concern for us. If we're going to be a company town, you could do a lot worse than the University of Michigan. That as an institution is going to be more stable, probably going to weather recessions better, but it's obvious that there's a lot of economic reliance on that as an institution in our community. And of those 94,000 jobs, if everybody in our community of working age were to work in those jobs, we still wouldn't have enough people to fill all those jobs. And we experience that on a regular basis. 76,000 people come in to work to the city each day, 18,000 leave each day, and about 17,000 live and work in the city. And so this is something that we're really focusing in on from a scenario perspective. We think this is a great opportunity to sort of test out not only some of the densification policies that we could be evolving in our city, how those relate to sustainability, particularly around transportation opportunities. But these numbers also I anticipate to go up if anybody's paying attention to recent plans released by the University of Michigan, for example. They're proposing a lot of new growth on the university and a lot of new impact. So I would fully impact these numbers to continue to climb. And when we think about what our opportunity is from a land use policy, I think it's really resonant that the city council was really having a lot of foresight, recognizing that one of the places that we can sort of help to mitigate some of this impact is to provide a lot more housing opportunities in our community. Not everybody doesn't live here and works here wants to live here, but based on some survey data that we've been looking at, about half of the people, anecdotally, it's not scientific, have expressed that, yeah, they would like to live in the city if they could, but there's a lot of barriers for them doing that. Affordability is probably chief among them. We are also a built-out city. So we have a couple of factors that really drive us to really be thoughtful and creative and make decisions about every resource that we have available. 42% of our parcel acreage is tax exempt. The university is only about a third of that, a little less than a third of that. So that 42% is inclusive of not only the university, but city parks, public schools. That is a big slice of our property and not included in this presentation. But what it means is our residential tax base really has to carry the water for services in this community, because so much of that remaining land is residential land. And so when you take out, like if we were to take out R1 and R2 zoning and some of the other restricted properties, such as historic districts and floodplains and public right-of-way, that leaves us with about 13% of our land in order to have a lot of significant redevelopment potential. That's why it's really important that we look at all of our zoning districts. One of the common conversations that were happening a lot is that directive of us looking for densification opportunities across the city. Density is sort of a loaded word, and it means 10 different things to 7 different people. And so what we're talking about is, we are talking about every zoning district in the city. How can we add more housing opportunities? How can we add more development opportunities? That doesn't mean the same scale as apropos in every single district. Density can take a lot of different forms, from an accessory dwelling unit to a duplex or fourplex to townhomes and condo buildings that were built in the 1920s and 30s, and cities systematically sort of regulated them away in favor of just downtown core apartments and single family housings over most of the city. So it's really important that we look at all of our property. Coincidentally, when you look at this map, the 13% that is sort of more prime or more perhaps appropriate for higher density development, you're going to see a lot of overlap with recent changes that the city did in its regulatory framework to create and rezone corridors to our transit corridor district. this map highlights a lot of those areas where we have rezoned them to emphasize few restrictions on vehicular parking and higher density and development potential, particularly along our existing transit routes in the city. So there's, in addition to, of course, the downtown district, which is highlighted here. Engagement, as I said, we've been going through engagement for the first half of this year. We've had, and late last year for that matter, this is the Green Fair. We had a partnership with the University of Michigan group for a house party week in September. We've held a series of meetings in the downtown library. This was a really great opportunity for us to really focus not only on the comprehensive plan, but some planning efforts that the Downtown Development Authority had going on. It was honestly one of the few times in my planning career where I was grateful that people walking in the door could provide input on multiple plans instead of just one plan. So I think it was a great success. You see a great turnout here represented in this at one of the presentations that was held that week. We've also had a series of workshops in libraries across the city with some of the similar content. And we've heard some similar themes through some of those. So this first one is really focused on a lot on, I believe a lot of this roll up was from some of our downtown workshops, and it's consistent with some of the directions that the city council identified. More affordable and accessible housing. I think one of the really interesting things that's happening from an affordable housing perspective is that one of the reasons that I came to work for the city of Ann Arbor is that I was really excited that this was a community that has invested deep and for a long time in affordable housing. And for the majority of that time, it was really focused on the lowest income levels, or 60% area median income and below is a common target. And what's happening over time is that more of, I dare say, more of you, my peers, people and more employees at the city and working in the city, we are having more and more first direct anecdotes or connections or experience with housing affordability problems starting to push higher into income bands than they maybe traditionally did in the city. And so that's great. It's cultivating a lot of conversation and a lot of momentum to figure out what we can do on the supply side to help address that. Whenever we're doing housing in the city, I always tell people I can't guarantee a housing unit or a home built in the city is going to result in somebody riding their bike to work, but it gives them the choice. It gives them the choice to ride their bike. It gives them the choice to walk. It gives them the choice to ride transit. That is not options available to somebody who is pick your direction of the city and building or residing in a home however many miles away from the outside of the city. Balancing our protection of trees and natural areas. The city has a robust natural features protection system. There's no desire to diminish that. Protections and the type of housing, not only affordability, but recognizing that for a long time, communities built single family housing almost exclusively, and recognizing that that's not always the right form that's going to work for everybody to be able to meet their housing goals or to even age in place. And we need to do a really good job of reaching out to people that we don't always hear from. There are members of our community that it's very easy for them to show up to a city council meeting or a planning commission meeting. And there are those that it's really hard for them. So we got to be very intentional and thoughtful to make sure we're hearing from a diversity of people when we're formulating these goals for the city. This is organizing some of those similar thoughts around those values, affordability, equity, and sustainability. Again, these were primarily from the downtown. One of the things that we asked as part of the downtown exercises, it's kind of hard to see from this, but you can vaguely see a couple of circles around the downtown. And one of the exercises we asked participants at our downtown workshops was, how do you envision these areas around downtown evolving? Should they be built up a lot, built up a little, or stay about the same? And you can see the breakdown. The majority of people thought that they should be built up a lot. These are great opportunities for us to realize more housing opportunities, more housing typologies, and in a great place in the downtown, close to job centers, close to campus, close to the most public transit choices. And the corollary to this that I think is going to be something that we need to address as part of the plan is when we start thinking about the downtown, there are certain amenities and investments and infrastructure that has to happen with that on the public side that cultivates that type of density and success. Thinking about effective sidewalks, planters, adequate bike infrastructure, those take public investments and public maintenance investments. That is hard for the city to do across the board. It's hard for the city, of course, to maintain 10-foot wide sidewalks everywhere in the city just to promote pedestrian friendliness. So one of the things that we're really going to have to figure out as part of some of the land use recommendations that happen in and around the downtown are what are our strategies in order to also cultivate that infrastructure so that as the new dorms are being built on the old L Bell Field, what is the connection to downtown? What is that infrastructure? Because it likely needs to evolve from a typical residential sidewalk to accommodate a much higher volume of people. And how are we going to fund that if it is deemed desirable? Citywide, we heard very similar themes. More housing is really important. Again, I think this goes hand in hand with more and more people experiencing affordability challenges, more bike lanes and pedestrian walkability. There's a lot of conversation and recognition about an appreciation, I would say, for the success that the city has in building out some of the downtown low stress bike network. Now I think it's appropriate for us to start prioritizing thinking about connecting that to other areas of the city for connectivity. How do we incentivize affordable and some of those missing middle housing? For those that aren't planner nerds like me, missing middle is just that. It's something maybe in between an apartment building and a single family home. Maybe it's condos in a small building or row houses or a courtyard apartment. Just a lot of the opportunity to sort of reintroduce things like duplexes and fourplexes to neighborhoods that a lot of communities, us included, spent 100 years making sure that you couldn't build in many of our neighborhoods anymore. A livelier riverfront and expansion of the downtown footprint, that is something that we heard citywide and similar to that specific exercise I shared. Preservation of historic districts and green spaces. The city has an abundance of natural features and parks. How do we protect those? Better public transit and accessibility for mobility. Density actually drives this as well. We have a great public transit system, and it's responsive to the desire. So when we're making land use decisions that help drive more demand and connection to transit, that will increase the opportunity that service will be augmented in frequency or span of service or timeliness. More small businesses and neighborhood retail options. Again, that is absolutely hand in hand with density. When you're looking at businesses, the sort of what I will say the romantic ideal of the neighborhood coffee shop or corner grocery store or you name it, and neighborhood bar, those depend on rooftops and households. And the more households that we bring to different areas of the city will increase the chances that those neighborhood scaled businesses will be able to succeed long term. This was highlighting some of the data from the not in the downtown workshops, are around the city workshops. 75% of respondents were supportive of 2 to 4 units per parcel in single family areas. Some were not supportive of adding more density. And these are some of the comments we heard. Concerns about parking, how is that going to impact on-street parking and accessibility of that to existing property owners? Is that somehow going to change the character of neighborhoods, not having them feel family friendly anymore? I'm not sure exactly what that means. And would that potentially encourage developers to play a bigger role in neighborhoods? Yeah, maybe it's possible, but then that's going to provide more housing opportunities for people to live in the city, full stop. One of the other things that's happened a lot when we're talking, we've found that this is a common sort of feedback that we get or observation when we're talking and engaging with the public. People see the housing development that's happening in the city, and it doesn't feel like it's meeting our goals. It seems like it's maybe very student focused. Maybe it's very expensive condos, and it can be very frustrating because when you see that happening, you're like, I thought we cared about affordable housing. None of these are affordable to me, or none of these are places that I would necessarily live as a family here in the city. We're trying to find ways to communicate that actually does have a positive impact. When you think about a new 14-story student apartment building being constructed on Southview, and say it has 350 bedrooms in it, those 350 heads and beds are in our community. They're here. And without that building, spread those 350 students amongst our housing stock. It does have ripple effects. It does have supply and demand effects on the cost of housing, on the availability of housing, on where that housing is located. And so part of this is also having a lot of education opportunities and just dialogue with the community about how those products that don't seem like they're meeting our goal actually can positively impact our goal, beyond the fact that they're supporting things like the affordability millage, the sustainability millage, and other things. This is the overall project schedule. Here we are in summer. Like I said, we have spent, you'll see most of the late last year and early this year has been focused on input. And we are shifting into some ideation and drafting and starting to develop the actual document. This summer, we're going to be doing some focus groups. One of them will be, we anticipate being focused on natural features. You're all going to have to probably arm wrestle or something to figure out, because we're going to want some representative of this group certainly to participate in that, as well as others from across the community. Generally speaking, our goal is to have a draft plan near the end of this year. I said, public engagement was sort of the brainstorming, the goals, the fears, the big ideas. The second half of this year is starting to translate those into what are those implementation steps that we want to accomplish? What are the specific recommendations? That is also going to be validated through a lot of public engagement. If I haven't emphasized it enough, this is the community's plan. It's not the planning department's plan. It's not the environmental commission's plan. It is the community's plan. And so we're going to be keeping opportunities all along the way for feedback and input on that process. And then everything going according to my dream schedule and plan, that will position us in an opportunity early next year to actually start the adoption process of the plan. And that is a process unto itself. In addition to public hearings, it will require approval by the Planning Commission, who is the official author of this document. And then they deliver it to the City Council, where the City Council gives it a yay or nay, and becomes at that point if approved, the official policy document of the city. So I will stop there if you have any questions, and then if barring any, or after we resolve those, I did receive those questions. I said I'm happy to go through those with some thoughts I have on those, but maybe it's a good time here to pause first.
Sure. Commissioner Brown, you have a question?
Oh, yeah. Thanks, Brett. That was a great presentation. I think it touched all the bases. But when I think of affordable housing, I think of three things. That is, ADUs, co-ops, which were very successful here in the 60s, it looked like, and boarding houses. I was shocked to hear that boarding houses are illegal here in Ann Arbor. So what can the city do to enable? Well, okay, that's great if it's not true. But what can the city do to better enable these kind of mechanisms?
Well, accessory dwelling units, let me start there. Since 2016, when we first enabled accessory dwelling units, the city council has made, I think, 2 subsequent modifications to that, each time making them a little bit less restrictive to hopefully encourage more. But we are at around 50 in the community since that time. So I think we've had some success in progressively making those a little bit more real, but I think there's a lot more opportunities for us to look at that. We recently actually submitted a grant proposal that we haven't heard from, but part of that is a goal of that is to develop pre-designed and building department approved accessory dwelling unit plans that any property owner could just download, you could apply for an ADU permit, click, I want ADU permit A. It's been already validated to meet code. Still, obviously, some specific site standards that would have to be applied to that, but we think that is another opportunity to maybe reduce the barrier of entry for that. And then other communities have gotten into financing opportunities. That's not really land use policy, but that would be another opportunity for us to explore to see if there's some opportunities, if it's not the city, maybe partnering with local banks to try to reduce some of that burden. As it relates to the co-ops and boarding houses, part of that 100-year history of zoning is this. A lot of our regulatory framework got very anti-student. A lot of our regulations became very protective of keeping students in parts of the city and not letting them move to other parts of the city. And part of that was taking land uses like fraternities and sororities and cooperative housing and restricting where and how they can be located in the city. And so, yeah, we've had a lot of conversations. I think that we're fortunate here in our community to have an active and successful cooperative housing organization. And I fully anticipate that to be part of it. It can be challenging because when we're doing land use regulations, we try to be very agnostic between when you're talking about sort of the ownership arrangements. That is, a house is a house. I don't care if it's rented. I don't care if it's owner occupied. A house is a house. Likewise, a cooperative is group housing, like a boarding house is group housing, like a fraternity or sorority is group housing. And we've regulated those in that same way, but because of them being lumped together, I can't speak for all of the previous planning commissioners and city councils, but I think that's how we got to our regulatory framework, because they look alike on paper from a legal regulatory perspective, and there was a fear of fraternities and sororities expanding into too widely throughout the city. But it's definitely on the table, and I think that it's an opportunity for us to look at.
Oh, thanks. What about boarding houses?
Same thing. They're group housing. They're restricted in the same way. We require special exception uses for them. We really restrict the geography of where they can be located for all of those uses.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Gruber?
Thank you, Brett. This is really great information. And this is an area where I admittedly have a lot to learn. And I think I learned a lot. So thanks. I'm excited about this.
Got a lot to learn too.
My question is, if you have thoughts on, you mentioned the family friendliness decreasing and we're losing families. And I am a mom, so I'm part of that population. And I'm curious if you have thoughts on how the Ann Arbor public school system challenges that are happening right now, the financial crisis, how that might compound this. And if you are bringing AAPS to the table to have them, I don't know how that would work, but I worry that challenge will mean fewer families coming to Ann Arbor and more families leaving Ann Arbor.
Well, I think there is opportunity. Let me sort of skate around your question more broadly. I think it's natural to ask, how are we partnering with Ann Arbor Public Schools? How are we partnering with the University of Michigan? And I want to be clear, this plan doesn't have a lot of shared goals in it. Those are entities that each have their own sort of focus, missions, and my mission is land use regulation. My mission is I want this document to give me the to-do list over the next 3 years of immediate, moderate, and long-term things that we want to do to make sure that the things that are getting built and the infrastructure that's getting installed in our community meet our goals. As it relates to family friendly, I don't know. Time will tell. It is hard to know, because I would say from a planning perspective, for a long time, Ann Arbor Public Schools have actually been a source of driving the unaffordability of our community. And I know that there's some challenges there now. I suspect that there are going to be some short-term pain or moderate-term pain, but at their core, it's a functional organization with resources that probably a lot of other school districts would give a right eye for that don't have. So I suspect that it could impact that. I can't speak for those families, but the one thing that is additionally impacting that now is even if that's not a barrier for you, it's hard for you to find a home that you can afford at times in the city now. So that's a place that I can work on. That could very well be a challenge, but at a minimum, I think this opportunity is more about what are we doing about our housing stock so that we don't have two barriers if it ends up being one. The short is, I don't know. It could, but we've got other policy issues that I think we should work on to address to make sure we're not duplicating those challenges long term.
Thank you.
Commissioner Mirsky?
Thank you, Brett, and thank you, Jamie, for joining us this evening. Just one question for clarification purposes. I might have some comments later, depending on time. But the 13% of land that's available for redevelopment, does that, I took your comments earlier to mean that includes the TC1 areas?
Yeah, that's basically all of our commercial, industrial, research districts, everything but R1, R2, and public land.
So that includes also then the surface parking lots and things like that as well?
Those would be, that's a good question.
Probably depends where they
it depends on where they are. Most of, over time, we've rezoned a lot of we actually have a parking district. We used to like parking so much that we created its own district that's the only thing you can do in it. And we've rezoned some of those, but then in the downtown, some of the public parking that the city has actually been focused on to sort of reapply for affordable housing development, those are often zoned D1, D2. So generally what that represents is pulling out the tax exempt. It's pulling out floodplains, historic districts, sort of areas that add a scarcity or a limitation to what can be realized, and then meant to also emphasize that most of our city is zoned R1 and R2. That's single family and duplex. And for us not to look at that as an opportunity to change, we're putting a hand behind our back to reach our goals.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much.
Yeah, I'll just add
Jamie, did you know on the zoning categories that were included?
Yeah, and so that 13% is like a very rough calculation. But the way that analysis was done, it was using zoning categories. So if parking happened to lay in one of those categories that was included, it would be in it. Which, honestly, most of the surface parking lots are probably in one of those commercial districts and not necessarily in a residential district. So the answer is yes and no.
Just quickly, the county has a couple of surface parking lots. Would that be included like in the 13%, or would that be some other zoning area?
They probably are based on their location.
Okay, thanks.
You have a line there to have something done there?
Commissioner Mitchell?
Thanks for this, Brett. I want to start our direction into talking about some natural features kinds of things. But before then, I just want to get a sense from you how the comprehensive plan will relate to the A20 plan and measures of carbon emissions.
Yeah, that's one of the specific directions that City Council tasked us with. The A20 plan has what I would say are some very relevant to land use policy and planning recommendations, and it has some that are not. What our intention is to make sure that we are incorporating those apropos to land use fully into our comprehensive plan so that we have the benefit of appropriately using those for our land use policy making going forward. I don't anticipate just well, let me back up. This is a community document. I am not sitting here drafting it. I don't anticipate it just being like, let's add that as Appendix A to the plan. I do anticipate us spending some time to identify those specific land use relevant. For example, the city, a recommendation for the city to bulk purchase EV chargers in order to reduce the cost and accessibility for those. That is us making financial incentives to that. that is different from what is our desire for when a development happens, how many EV chargers are required, if any, regardless of the mechanisms of funding them. We would never put a land use category in there that says if the city happens to have some in a warehouse, you are required to do 3 EV chargers. So that's bifurcating we want EV chargers, and those have been incorporated in our regulations, but that recommendation of the 820 plan is probably not comprehensive plan worthy. That is an incentive, a financing mechanism. The comprehensive plan will say, how are we doing on EV parking? Do we want to go further on that? Do we want to back off because we've had challenges? So I envision taking the pieces out of that plan that are core to land use policy and regulation and fully incorporating those into the comprehensive plan, which they are not today.
I'm not sure that matches the carbon measurement, but go ahead. That's fine. Thanks.
So, Aaron, do you want to bring up the list of questions on natural features and we can just kind of go through those? I know Brett kind of answered some of them during the conversation, but I think that might just
actually have them if it's okay. I could, if that's
sure.
okay, I could just go through them and
that's where that works.
Okay, great. So the first question was, what is the timing, the process of the natural features section? We talked about this with the calendar. It's no different than the plan. I anticipate from basically the summer to the end of this year, we are going to be drafting the entirety of the plan. And so natural features is going to be part of that. We are trying very hard to think about this holistically. When we're talking about natural features, we are not going to be doing that independent of what does that mean for equity? What does that mean for sustainability? What does that mean for adding densification? So we are very intentionally trying to bring this plan together at the same time. So specifically the timing and process, drafting through the rest of this calendar year with the hopes of a draft ready to start considering for adoption in early 2025. I'll keep going unless somebody yells at me. All right. How that relates to the question about how are we going to build time in the work plan to update the natural features element. I want to be clear. This plan is intended to replace 5 documents that are currently part of our comprehensive plan. Currently, the city has 8 plans that have all been adopted as our comprehensive plan. That's about, 800, 1,000 pages, 8 different documents that have inconsistencies in them. And so for you as a resident or a property owner or a policymaker, it's really challenging for you to say, does this meet our goals or not? Well, let me first go through these 8 documents to see if it does or not, and where there might be a question of interpretation, which one do I go with? So a big part of this is trying to consolidate that canon of policy documents into a smaller, accessible for not only you, for the council, for the planning commission, for the public to understand what the city's priorities are. So I want to be clear, when we're talking about a natural features element or updating the natural features plan, it is going to be a comprehensive plan. It will address natural features. It's going to address land use. It's going to address transportation to some regard. It's going to address a lot of things. And our goal is to make that a smaller, singular, accessible document that still articulates our goals, still articulates our priorities for how we're going to achieve those goals, but it's something that is less burdensome than going to the website now and having to click through 8 documents. Don't even get me started on our 28 approved resource documents.
John Mirsky?
I think one of those documents is the sustainability framework. Is that correct?
That's right. That's one of the ones anticipated to be replaced.
Okay, so that would be then replaced by or incorporated into the new comprehensive plan. Is there any element of that right now seems to be less in favor than what it was at the time of adoption, or are we not at a point yet where we have really sort of force ranked some of the priorities or anything like that?
No. The sustainability framework, some of you are probably here. I was not when that was adopted, but I read the sustainability framework as intending to be an organizing structure for other plans rather than a policy document unto itself. I don't think anything there has fallen out of favor, but I think a lot of those things lack specificity. I will tell you, when we are having community conversations about TC1 zoning and the opportunity to add more housing along corridors, I could reference in the sustainability framework, well, this calls for more of a variety of housing types. It's a pretty broad statement that doesn't always resonate with the people on the other side of that conversation who might be really scared about the changing conditions of their neighborhood. So I don't think anything there is out of favor, but I don't think it provides much specificity for us to be making regulatory changes to advance them.
Yeah, I will just add, at least my understanding of the sustainability framework is it almost, in a ways, does what Brett was just describing, and that it was trying to take goals and values about sustainability across a variety of plans and compile it into one area. So I think it could be useful for us to kind of look at it from that lens and think about, like, what are some of these broader goals that kind of apply to all these plans that Brett's been talking about.
Oh, the next question I had was, what jurisdictions have exemplary natural features protections built into their code and comprehensive plan? Ann Arbor's is actually pretty strong. The work of my predecessors and you and your predecessors have resulted in a regulatory framework that is pretty robust. We have not, I don't sit here and tell you that I have my eye on the city of Boulder or the city of Seattle as the model for it. I will say that from my experience on the development side, we protect a lot of natural features and a lot of natural resources. I don't come to this with the intention that we need to back off that. I don't hear that. There's members of city council here. I don't think that was part of their direction. Not that they can speak for the entirety of the council. I don't think that there's intention to lessen the protections that we have in place. Likewise, I want to be honest, I don't hear a lot of intention to advance or protect more. That is a balance of meeting a lot of these goals around sustainability and new housing density and the like. And so in short, I don't know what those plans are, but I would sort of turn that around. If there are plans that you think are particularly excellent, that you think that you would like us to make sure that we're referencing, that's why we're here to listen. There was a reference to the Seattle streetscape plan. I don't know where that note came from. I am familiar with that because we actually looked at that when we were doing our TC1 zoning and some of our trying to find the right balances of how we protect or use right of way in order to accomplish long-term multimodal, which is really challenging in a built-out corridor. But tell us if you have them now. We'd love to have those resources. Tell us which ones are great, and ideally why they resonate with you. What is it about them is it a format? Is it the way it communicates why it's important? Is it the areas of focus? Happy to look at those. And you don't have to tell me now. You can Erin literally can pull up my teams and bother me as much as she wants as those come in to her. Was the protection of natural features and the increase in biodiversity or ecosystem services communicated as a priority for the hired consultant? It wasn't, but this question really got Jamie and I sort of thinking a lot. And one of it could be a way that we frame our natural resources priorities going forward. But it's interesting that it got us thinking about, we're hearing choice and diversity in a lot of threads of the comprehensive plan. You just listen to me drone on and on about choice and diversity of housing. Our transportation plan has choice and diversity of transportation options. We, as part of our consultant team, we have retail strategist and economic analysis. There's a lot of talk about the diversity of businesses. I think people are seeing, while not unique to Ann Arbor, sort of the chainification of a lot of downtowns, ours included. There's a desire for diversification of businesses. And so the short is no, it wasn't directed to us as a priority. But again, if that is a framing of how we should be thinking about that, I think it's in line with a lot of the other subject areas of the comprehensive plan that we'll be wrestling with over the course of the year. Related, did the city council direct any specific policy requirements to natural features? No, neither to relax them nor to expand them. So again, I want to reemphasize my interpretation of that is this is a community that values natural features. We have a robust protection. I see that as the base. We have not heard a lot of we need to double that or triple that. I want to be clear with our public conversations, but no, there was not specific. And I don't think that that means that it's not valuable to the planning commissioner or the city council. I think it's a recognition that it's something that has to be considered in the balance of all the other goals that we're looking for here.
So Brett, you missed a question.
What groups will be included in the natural features group meeting? I don't know yet, but as I mentioned, you are going to be included in the natural features focus group. We're anticipating focus groups around natural features, around sustainability, and around equity. And am I missing one, Jamie?
We're thinking maybe like affordability or housing, something.
Affordability, housing. Yeah. So these will be groups that I'm going to be appointing them to sort of help advise this process. They'll probably be in the 8 to 12 people. They'll probably meet 3 times over the course of summer to fall. And those will be groups that we will be reaching out to say, all right, this is how we think natural features, affordability, sustainability. These are some of the important points that we think need to be included in the comprehensive plan. It's not going to be deciding that, but it's going to be helping us to frame that, to draft it, to edit it so that when we start those community conversations, they are well thought out, they're logical, and they seem to reflect important priorities for us to go forward. I will tell you that I have been sort of thinking about some names. I'm welcome for suggestions on this, but a representative from this group will definitely be a part of the natural features focus group. The one I missed?
That's it. Yeah. Thanks.
All right. The next I've sort of pulled 2 questions and I'm answering them at the same time. When developing the new natural features section, can we use improving biodiversity as an overall guiding principle? I sort of addressed that before, but also invasive species removal, possible credit or other incentives. Yes, on both. One of the things I talked about, biodiversity could be a part of that. It's like I said, it's consistent with how we're thinking about a lot of different facets of our land use policy. Invasive species removal. The question was about possible credit or incentives. I'd be curious what you mean by that. I will tell you one of the things that's been happening at a staff level, and this I think will be vetted with the focus group once that's established, is we have a lot of suburban, antiquated, old land use regulations that emphasize open space. We have districts that require 60% open space, and not always, but a lot of times that results in lawn area. And one of the things that we've started to talk about just at the consultant team table with is that really important to us? Like, all of you probably know this better than I do, but my training tells me that a mowed lawn isn't much better than a parking lot when you're talking infiltration and ecological impact. And so we recently had a project where, as part of the requirements for it, was to maintain a portion in a truly naturalized area. It was an area that had a very significant bur oak. There was a lot of seedlings there. And so part of that plan was, let's actually protect that in a very naturalized area. When we say you're keeping that open, we don't mean you're going to seed it. We mean you're going to keep it as a naturalized area. And so one of the things that I think we're exploring is, maybe it's not so much about the quantity of the open space, but rather the quality of the open space. And so with that, I don't know if that is resonant with you, but I'm curious, when you're talking about invasive species removal, that seems very component to that. Part of that would be the maintenance, making sure those areas don't get overrun with invasive species. But I'm curious just to hear a little bit more. I don't know if that was anybody particular. What was that kind of what was driving the question? And more specifically, what would you envision for credits or incentives if that were achieved?
Well, it came up in the biodiversity work group, and we know there's a cost today if people take out trees during development. And they were trying to figure out, what do we do with invasive species? So if we can have a cost for a tree, we can give them a credit if they take out a buckthorn tree. Maybe the same type of formula based on diameter or something like that. We didn't get into the details how that credit would work or anything like that, but it was just kind of in the biodiversity work group, we talk a lot about invasive species in our parks and our nature areas. We also know our parks and our nature areas are a small percentage of the land in the city. So how do we address the big percentage of the land, which is property, residential property, development, things like that. So this was just something we could look at on that side that would go that way. You're right, as far as turf grass is equal to asphalt.
Yeah. So you might, I don't want to say you might be surprised, but often with our development proposals, actually, as part of a requirement of approved site plan, is invasive species do have to be removed as part of that. That is often part of the approved plan. If we identify that, I will be honest, the long-term maintenance of that is probably less successful. But we actually pretty frequently, at the time of completion, that is one of the things we're often verifying, is that has invasive species identified been removed from that. So sometimes that's just required as part of our development review process. But I appreciate that. I think it sounds like sort of what the staff conversation is probably pretty consistent with that question, is like, how do we find ways to incentivize and ensure longer term maintenance of quality ecological areas as opposed to superficial, if that, like lawn areas.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Will the format of the new natural features section follow the format of the existing natural features master plan document or the format in the current UDC? Probably not either. The UDC is a regulatory framework. The 2004 natural features master plan, I think, not speaking to content, that document led us to where we are now with pretty robust tree cover compared to other communities, a pretty robust floodplain regulatory framework that puts us in a good position relative to comparable communities. But I think, to my point about being a more accessible, more understandable, more clear document, I don't anticipate it looking like the 2004 document. But again, if there are documents that speak to you as commission members that you think, man, I wish we could do something like that, send them our way. This is the time where we're starting to marry content with format. Both are important so that we do end up with a document that not only says what we want it to say, but it's understandable and it conveys the information to a wide audience. So no, but that's where we're at now. It's a great time to pose the question. If you see examples, we want to see them. We want to hear from you about what they are. Will the content in the new current natural features master plan and the UDC natural features section be included in the new document? To be determined. Again, I want to be clear. We're starting from the framework that we have a very robust natural features protection framework. Don't anticipate reducing that. So at a minimum, yes, you're going to see that reflected there. That could be wrong. I could be wrong. We could go out to the community and they say, I don't care about woodlands. Screw it. I don't think that's the case. This is a community that's always valued those natural features. So at a minimum, you are going to see some of those same categories reflected. But again, this is an opportunity. If there's something not there, tell us what's missing out of that. If that's reflected in other plans, that's something we can look at. As we start looking at natural features, though, I just want to be honest that I think that's where we're we're going to have to, as a community, process how does that relate to our other goals of densification? How does that relate to our other goals of affordability? And sometimes we can't have it all. Sometimes we have to find trade-offs. We're finding that a lot with development as it relates to sustainability features. Having an affordable development that is also fully electric or that is geothermal, those can add challenges one to another. They're possible, but sometimes we can't have it all. And so part of this is if we want to start adding more robust natural features, protections than what we do, or new categories, that's where I think we're going to have a lot of the conversation about how holistically it balances with some of our goals. You specifically talked about, to that end, I think native forest fragments, qualified urban woodlands, heritage trees, rare and threatened species. Again, the question is evolving what protections we have versus adding new ones, rare and threatened. So we have endangered species. We have landmark trees versus heritage trees. There's also a couple questions relative to applying those standards to single family or fourplex properties. I'm not currently considering that. Those natural features come into play when we're doing site plan review. That does result in some natural features that are not protected at the single family and fourplex level. It's not something that I'm actively looking at. So it would be a very consistent application of those protections as we exist today going forward. But again, that's part of this conversation going forward. Would a woodland management plan be required for any development that requires removal of a native forest fragment or qualified woodlands? I don't know. I think that we don't require it now. We could. I think if we are going to get in the business of trying to cultivate higher quality areas rather than quantity of areas, we will need some sort of mechanism, whether it's woodlands or other areas. So I do see that there's going to be an opportunity to do something in that realm. If we identify a natural area, we're going to have to find the mechanism to make sure it's not a one-time removal of invasive species, but an ongoing removal of invasive species. And we're actually going to be there was talk about how this impacts public property. We're actually going to be sitting down next mid-July with that team, because we need to learn a lot about some of the cost implications of that. We're going to sort of try to dive into what is the cost to establish and maintain a unit of lawn versus a unit of forest fragment that is routinely removed of invasive species. We're going to have to wrestle with that if we also want to wrestle with things like affordability. So I don't know about specifically a woodland management plan, but as we try to cultivate more higher quality spaces, whether it's a plan or regulations, we're going to have to figure out a way to make sure that we're achieving that in order to be successful. So I think it's probably something very similar to a woodland management plan, but it might have broader implications than just forest fragments. It might just be other natural features that are of concern to us. The new stormwater management regulations reduce the emphasis on vegetative methods of stormwater management in the city right-of-way. Will the natural features section be enhanced to make sure that there isn't a gap? I don't know exactly what you mean by gap, but the right-of-way and the private property will continue to be regulated separately. Our land use, our UDC applies to private property, not public property, but the comprehensive plan does advise not only on private property, but on infrastructure investments. So that is something that we could look at. I know you guys have had a lot more conversation on that than I have. But generally, we have very robust stormwater as it applies to private property. I'm sure you're aware I think we're the second only to Midland as far as in the state of Michigan, our community rating system. So we have done a lot of work as a community in the stormwater realm, and it's reflected in some benefits to community members, particularly who are in the floodplain. If UM develops metrics to track improvements in biodiversity, would Ann Arbor considering partnering with UM on the metrics? Yes. Yeah, of course. It's just a question of resources and who's going to do it. But those things take commitment, but of course. I'd love the opportunity to partner with U of M more on land use policy, and we've had some successes and we've had some, what's the opposite of successes? But Yeah, of course. I think there's great opportunity. I don't say that because our missions are different that there's animosity there or that we don't find partnerships. We do. We partner with them on a lot. It doesn't always relate to single unified policy goals around land use and development. But yeah. Oh, will there be? We talked about single to fourplex. Will there be protection for natural features? Not as currently proposed right now. We're not envisioning any change to that. Again, the plan's in its development stage. That could evolve, but I think that if we are going to be trying to particularly look at single family and duplex districts for opportunities for infill, that could manifest in allowing multiple units in those districts. It could manifest in different lot sizes. I do think that could result in some loss of trees, but that's one of those trade-offs that we're going to have to wrestle with as a community. Do we want to provide more opportunity for that development to happen? And the sweet spot is, of course, to make sure that we're providing a lot of flexible options so that we're providing the most flexibility so we can achieve both. Maybe it's not just duplexes and fourplexes. Maybe it's cottages. You can develop a single family lot into small cottages and they can be arranged around a sensitive natural resource. But generally, right now, I don't envision a change to that. So no. And I think that is the end of the questions, other than not going through all the specific current natural features plan sections.
So who else has questions for Brett while we have him here? Commissioner Mirsky.
If I may, thank you, Brett. I'll speak for myself. I think the city, both with a small c and a capital C, is fortunate to have you. So thanks for all your work. I have maybe two comments that you can respond to. The first is when we talk about affordability, you talked about affordability, for example, sustainability and affordability. One of the things that is never included in those calculations, almost never, is the social cost of carbon. And that's just, I don't know how we address that, but when we talk about natural gas versus all electric or any other kinds of choices, we almost never include the social cost of carbon. And I don't know if council can address that. I know that the university in its PCCM recommendations has looked at applying some type of carbon fee or carbon cost in its activities. I don't think it's gone anywhere, but it just seems to me that's a big gap across the board, and that's not limited to the city of Ann Arbor. Second comment I want to pick up on, you mentioned what's going on down at Elbow Field earlier. I think it's great that that's being considered. I mean, that could be, when it's all built out, another 4,000 beds down there, or 5,000 maybe even. And I just hope, and maybe this is again something council can influence, that the university and the city really have formal processes that coordinate their campus plan and the city's comprehensive plan. It seems like there's so many opportunities for win-win, particularly, for example, just in transit, whether it's biking or walking, river crossings, what U of M is planning with their, what do they call their people mover thing that's going to be a monorail or something like that, bus rapid transit. And it just seems to me that that's something that is really, really important. So you can respond to those, but I just wanted to emphasize those 2 points. And that's all from my side for tonight. Thanks.
I don't profess to be an expert. I know. I will just say, after A20, we have explored numerous ways to try to, I don't want to say gamify, but make it easier to understand the trade-offs with carbon as it relates to developments. And I'll be honest, that's not always a factor in whether it meets our code or not. But it's really challenging. I've had several conversations with our OSI staff, who I greatly respect, and the answer is always, it depends. I can't provide anything else on that. As it relates to the University of Michigan, yeah, I agree. And I don't want to overemphasize. We do have a lot of partnerships. You know, when you're talking about transportation, we're having a lot of conversations about the use of public right of ways and how those are used and when they're reconfigured, whether it's bridges to the hospital or the presence of a BRT operating on the street. There are a lot of conversations. So I would generally say I don't profess that I've had a 20 or 30-year history here in this community, but I see a lot of partnerships happening. I see it improving. I see it as a slow build. And we're probably better now than we were 5 years ago, than we were 10 years ago. But yeah, I think if we were just to all sit on our back porch and sketch out why isn't this happening more collaboratively, it's probably still short of that.
Commissioner Mitchell?
Thanks. I just want to ask one specific question and then a broad kind of thing. And that is there any plan to assess, excuse me, heat island effects relating to the development that is planned with the densification? And that could be across the city. Things I assume will be changing.
I think it's not something that we've done analysis on, but we could definitely look at it. I mean, we've had some regulatory changes over time. I think sort of obtusely relative to that, we started measuring our parking areas, and when you have parking areas, we require so much landscaping now and trees within those parking areas. So I think that's probably it is probably a good thing for us to analyze. Is that still the right way to approach that? It is hard to, not impossible, but how do those policy decisions, urban heat island is going to have an impact across the city? How do we translate that to what's happening on this one parcel? That can be challenging, but yeah, I think it's something we can take a look at for sure. And I think that is probably not only near and dear to this group, but also the sustainability framework as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I saw some information about using GIS to map, so that could be done progressively, right? And you could track it over time. So the last thing, my broad thing that I found as I was trying to get ready for this meeting is that this really resonated with me. It's just a quote from a group called Geodesigning Nature into Cities. And that is, nature is not optional. It's absolutely essential to leading a meaningful and healthy life. And I think that's what you want to plan for us, right? That the city wants to have a place where it's comfortable, and nature is definitely a part of that and will be part of keeping people in an area, part of what becomes, our lives. So that's all. I don't necessarily expect you to comment, but I just want to toss that out there.
Commissioner Graham?
Thank you, Mr. Leonard. I'm very happy you came and talked to us. I wanted to listen to you for quite some time, actually.
Well, I never hear that.
You have couched the protection of natural features as kind of a zero-sum game, but it really hasn't been anywhere along, has it?
I don't mean to say it's a zero-sum game. I mean to say that I think that we have achieved a level of protection of natural features that is, use your term, adequate, remarkable, successful. And I don't think that there is any intention to compromise that, at least speaking from my team's perspective. I think that as we consider going further, be it in categories or extent, I do think that they warrant really challenging conversations as it relates to a lot of goals in the city. And so maybe that's the definition of zero sum. That's not how I intended it. It's to recognize, I wanted to, I'm starting from the perspective of my experience in talking with petitioners that we have a robust framework that has resulted, I think, in a lot of the nature that Commissioner Mitchell was referencing. And just like sustainability measures, there are trade-offs and balances that we're going to have to consider if we want to go further along those.
But it's never been true, actually, that we have essentially asked petitioners to identify the natural features on their site and then you shall not touch. It's always been true that in the planning process, we have balanced what they have agreed to keep with what they've needed to take.
Yep.
And that balancing process has included lots of other considerations.
Yep.
And what then is required is mitigation at a modest cost, actually. We've never had a procedure in Ann Arbor where there's a big tree and you can't touch it. Ever. Right?
That's correct. Yeah. And I think
So let me ask you, if the greatest number of valuable trees, and let's call them landmark or heritage, are being lost on single, 2, and 4 family properties without any mitigation, then does that change how you balance things? And I mean unintended.
Yeah.
Single family house gets torn down, a new house that's larger gets built. There's a perimeter of that footprint.
I think
no regulatory application where trees that aren't taken for the new footprint are protected, unlike commercial property.
I think it's a balance. I think if we were to say, if your house has a landmark or heritage tree on it and you want to, you desire to build an addition.
Yep.
Maybe you want to build an addition because maybe you just want an addition because you want a bigger kitchen.
Right.
Maybe you want to build an addition because you have a family member that can no longer go upstairs and they need an at-grade house. And so for us, it is a policy decision for us to say, if that addition requires you to remove that landmark tree, right now you can remove it because it's single family and it's not required. For us to add that is a policy decision that's going to add a mitigation cost to that same project. So in that case, in one case, you can remove it and accommodate your desired improvement of your property. In the other case, you can do the same, but it's going to be more costly. And so I think the balance there is, how do we balance affordability with the removal of that resource? And there is a trade-off there for sure.
Modest one, yes, but the real issue is the 6 trees that are outside the footprint of that addition, they get killed by the builders because there's no regulatory framework that requires them not to kill them. This is what's happening. And I appreciate you don't want to more complicate natural features parts of your life, but stuff's going on out there that needs balancing and
I want to be clear.
a lot of unintentional loss.
Yeah. I'm not writing it now. Thank you. This part of it is we wanted to hear that perspective. What I'm hearing from you, I don't know if the balance of the group is of agreement of that, but what that comment is we should regulate all natural features or just trees on all properties.
Well, if there's a wetland in somebody's backyard and they build their addition right up to the edge of the wetland, they're really intruding on that natural feature. We don't have adequate buffers. So, I mean, we can get into the rest of them, but the main deal in Ann Arbor are trees and especially heritage trees. That means native large trees. And they're very fragile about how things happen on their roots. So there has never been a natural features ordinance in Ann Arbor.
Yeah.
What we have done is in a very balanced way, try to conserve them. And the balancing act is a modest mitigation charge if you don't want to. It's never been no. Just setting the record straight. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Commissioner Dale, let's move on.
I want to like be clear that what I'm saying is not a solution to what Commissioner Graham is saying. And it's just a comment, not a question. But I think understanding that it would take a lot of resources. I think ultimately, I really think it would be fantastic to have some sort of comprehensive inventory of all of our ecosystem services, not just trees or whatever, including on private land, and just have like a very fantastic map that basically allows us to say these are the areas that are high priority because of the ecosystem services they provide, or it actually helps affect our resiliency of our communities. And I don't know if there's like people are talking about having something that is a incentive base or just community awareness. I don't know how it happens in implementation, but I think starting with something that is like a very good mapping resource that actually can relate to being something that ends up being almost like a quality index that can be used in the decision-making matrix when it comes to any property. And how that is implemented, I don't know, but I think it speaks to what you're saying about like all green space is not equal. And I think that there's this false dichotomy between density and affordability and maintaining some of those nature-based solutions, for stormwater and everything else that I don't think it needs to be, but I think that it's starting to look at how do you prioritize the very high quality areas and take that into consideration in sort of a formalized way. And I don't know if that's something that's already being done to a greater degree than I'm aware of. But
I don't want to suggest that it's always incompatible, but they can be incompatible. And so finding that regulatory framework, when we're talking about that and identifying sensitive areas, we can do that. We have to define why we would regulate your home different than Mr. Graham's home based on that. And so that can be done. And as it relates to the mapping, I don't think it's all the resources. This group might know more than I do, but I think that the city has made some progress on an urban forestry plan. I don't know if that's just publicly own inventory trees or all, but I mean, I think that's, but I'm certain it's not all natural features for sure.
Does anybody else have questions? And while you're thinking about, Brett, you mentioned the environmental commission would have somebody at the focus groups. Is that one person, or how many people were you thinking?
One for now. I'll get back to you if I'll open it up.
Okay.
You all talk together. If I get one, you'll share, right?
Oh yeah, we all have the same opinion.
All right. I'm not gonna pick though. You guys gotta figure that out.
We'll take care of that part. Anybody else have questions while he's here? And thank you very much, Brett, for a very good conversation.
My pleasure. Well, if anybody's thinking for last questions, as I said, share any thoughts, ideas. Mr. Graham, I'm just telling you sort of where I'm at. I take that feedback. Thank you. I'm just, that's part of this process where we want to listen to folks. If you have examples of plans that resonate with you, please share them. This is going to be the community's plan, and I'm trying hard to deliver that, but and we're talking to a lot of people, and you're a part of that. So if you have examples, please do share those. If you have other thoughts, please don't hesitate to share them. You can always easily share them with Aaron, or even easier, write to my hot little inbox, planning@a2gov.org. All of your thoughts, wishes, desires, questions, planning related can always be addressed there. And I'd be remiss, Councilmember Ackman-Dish, I hope I didn't misattribute any of your intentions of comprehensive plan resolutions. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Brett.
Thank you, Brett. And Jamie.
So our next agenda topic is to review the questions about the anaerobic digester presentation that went to the Energy Commission. And I know I sent some to Aaron, and I know Bridget sent some to Aaron. Are there other questions that people would like to get answered? And then we can just consolidate that and move on. Lisa Dish, Commissioner, Councilmember Dish.
Yeah, I forgot to do this, but I really did want a more thorough answer to the question that Commissioner Mirsky asked, which is that, if we took the financial piece out of the picture, which of the energy production outcomes benefits us more? And I'm thinking of this especially right now because we're debating the Southtown project amendment. And if we had a source, of energy from waste, from, the endless and ever expanding source of waste that that would be a real alternative that would benefit a number of green projects like this. And so I think, Mr. Mirsky, you asked your question better than I could possibly reiterate it. So I'm really hoping that, and I felt like you got an answer, but it wasn't as deep because the question was complex. And so I don't think the person could answer on their feet. So I'm very curious to hear more about that.
Commissioner Mirsky.
I think, Lisa, you rephrased my question well. I mean, I think this is certainly an opportunity. I mean, we humans generate waste. And the question is, what is the best use of that waste? And I think without having studied this, but just as a gut sense and having sat through the presentation, this is a good option, maybe even the best option. This differs from other waste, as you and I were in an email thread related to Southtown, and I think this is, certainly differentiated from CAFO waste. That's completely different. I have two concerns that I expressed in the other meeting that I want to make sure the group that's evaluating this process addresses. First of all, relates to one topic that we've addressed in this group, and that is the question of PFAS. So we all recall that it was like in December of last year, we had a presentation from Public Services where we agreed with their intent to stop taking waste and distributing it on agricultural fields because of concerns about PFAS, and it is now being landfilled. And so the question is, if we go to a biodigester, what happens to PFAS that's obviously in that waste? I mean, we know it's in there right now. That's why we took the action that we took. And does that indiscriminately then simply re-enter the environment? And what are the consequences of that? And frankly, what are the better alternatives? And the other question that I posed that to me is really important, I posed a number of them, was question of space. So the city has evaluated a biodigester twice in the past at the current facility, at the current WRRF facility. And one of the reasons for not pursuing it in the past, only one, was space. There was another one where, because of space, the proposal was to truck the waste offsite to an offsite biodigester, which would have added a lot of cost. But I'm concerned that given what we just talked about, given the university's plans, which we also talked about, which includes a lot of new housing, both down in the Ebble Field area, as well as proposals for housing along Plymouth Road and potentially along Fuller Road, that if the city indeed does grow, and we said we didn't have enough space in the past, how do we have enough space now for a biodigester? So I may have mentioned that that one process apparently has been dropped, and that has created some new space at the facility. But I hope that the city investigates both of those very, very closely, as well as the one that you mentioned. I mean, what do we do with this waste? that is sustainable in all regards, where we're maybe hopefully generating energy. We're doing it with a waste stream that we otherwise don't know what to do with, but we have to address that in a way where we also capture and address the concerns related to PFAS.
Who else has questions or comments? Commissioner Mitchell? You're on mute, Rita.
You're muted.
Sorry. I'm going to send in some of my minor kind of questions, but I think I want to understand, even consistent with what Commissioner Mirsky was asking, just the financials relating to this. And one, it's like, because it appears that this can be a revenue stream related to the biogas. So it'd be helpful to understand that. And I want to understand also whether there is a safety risk at all for running a biodigester, because it is a gas that can be explosive, as I understand. So that, along with assuring that if it is used, that the pipelines don't leak the methane, which we all know is a serious greenhouse gas.
Yeah, Rita, when I look at the financial models, it looks like the RNG scenario cost about 7 million more, but generates more annual profit from selling the natural gas. But we can make them clarify that. That's what it looks like. Commissioner Brown?
Yeah, I missed, I was able to look at the recording of the Energy Commission presentation. And, my impression is just that the devil, of course, is in the details here, because there are various issues that John Mirsky's already brought up. And I just think it's going to require a little bit more deliberation on everybody's part. So, I have some questions, but I think I would have better questions if I had a clearer understanding of what's being proposed and what the risk and benefits are for each of these concerns. So, it's clear to me in general, we should capture whatever methane we're generating ourselves. We should capture that. Because it's either going to, it's 14 times or 20 times the greenhouse gas potential of carbon dioxide. It's all going to end up as carbon dioxide eventually, whether it's composted, whether it's in a landfill, or whether it's, burned in a car or in a, gas furnace or a gas stove. So I think it's a good principle to just capture whatever methane that you're making. And then converting it, and then the other question is, well, with that methane that you've captured, say in the solid waste in the wastewater treatment plant, how much of it do you really need on site, both for generating heat and electricity, and how much are you going to be able to export, and how difficult is it to really manage that? Because I've done enough online searching to see that it's a complicated process. It's going to be fairly difficult to manage. Without flaring, there's going to have to be a certain amount of flaring going on site, and there's a lot of balancing you have to do with the bacteria you're using in an anaerobic digester. That the bacteria can get all out of kilter. It's a really complicated, bioreactor system that's prone to destabilization. So it requires a lot of fine tuning, just to keep it safely operating. And there is the space limitations. That's clear to me that it would have to be there. There's no point in trucking it to the landfill like what the previous proposal was in 2017. And it was good to see that there was some experience about particularly, the Grand Rapids, the city of Grand Rapids efforts, to try to implement something like this. So I don't think we're going to be able to do much of anything tonight, but what I would propose is that we organize some kind of a public hearing where we all do some homework. We maybe have some background discussions, and let's have people from let's have Keith Sanders present, let's have Missy present, somebody from OSI, people from the Energy Commission, the Environmental Commission who are interested, and people from We Care Denali too. Because, one of the things that's not clear to me is I'm sure there's methane being generated in the current wastewater treatment plant. That's hard to avoid. A lot of, in Europe, where prices are a lot higher for gas and things like that, and electricity both, these wastewater treatment plants are already capturing their methane under their secondary treatment, as a dome or with their secondary treatment facilities. So I would believe that there are also other ways of doing this instead of engineering, a super highly engineered anaerobic digester on a smaller footprint than is ideal, on a location that's close to a hospital as well as close to the Huron River. So I just think this deserves a little bit more deliberation, and I'm not sure what the deadline is for making a decision here. So that's all I wanted to add right now. But I did a lot of literature searches till I got cross-eyed. And I did find one paper here that was published 2 years ago about per and polyfluoroalkyl substances in the atmosphere of waste management infrastructures. So PFAS are clearly a problem. But as usual, it's the biggest risk is by the people working at the wastewater treatment plant. But there will be other emissions, but they're not so different. What the PFAS emissions will be driven by heat. And, you can measure PFAS emissions around landfills because of legacy, burial of biosolids in landfills. You can measure it anywhere. There are a couple of papers from China, but they're all measuring PFAS in the air around manufacturing plants and other such facilities. There's not a whole lot of data out there, is what I'm saying. So I haven't had the chance yet to look at grants.gov or some of the other.
Hey, Steve, if you've got more questions, we can just get them to Aaron and we can ask the consultants to answer all those questions. I think it's a little premature to have a workshop, but because I didn't get the impression from the first presentation they were getting ready to source or anything. They don't have money yet, so there's still time.
No, I understand that, but this is like a technical challenge.
Yes.
That needs to have input from a number of that could benefit from the input from a number of people that are fairly knowledgeable, and I would just say that. So I don't want to take up any more time on this.
Okay. John Mursky?
Yeah, very quickly. I think you're both right. This is just a preliminary study. The city's not on the verge of making a decision. I think Steve's suggestion is a good one. And I just wanted to address one comment that you made, Brooks, and that is the one scenario where the city would sell the RNG, that's taking advantage of some financial incentives. And there's a possibility of additional changes to the regulatory and incentive structure that would make the other scenario, let's say, nearly as favorable as that scenario. So, this is evolving, and I think if we were to do something like this, it behooves us to maybe consult expertise at Eagle and to look at some of the other cities. It's not just Grand Rapids that just started up theirs, but there's a couple of other biodigesters that are operating in the state of Michigan and certainly in the region. So I think it's great that this has been brought to both commissions, and I think it's great that the city and council is listening to these comments. So I appreciate it.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions on this or comments? Okay, I think our next item on the agenda was reports from committees or other commissions, council and chair. So For the biodiversity work group, what we accomplished last month was pulled together a list of questions that Brett Leonard went through. And that's pretty much all we did. Circular economy.
Yes, John Calloward was leading that, and he is not on the commission anymore. So there's been some back and forth. Anya and I were discussing it with Brooks, and I think Anya is a little busy now, so I'm going to step into John Calloward's role. So I'm looking forward to the next meeting, but I'm not sure when that's scheduled. Aaron.
Yeah, I can follow up with Sarah on that. I'm not sure when those occur either. So I can follow up with the solid waste folks that I know attend those.
Okay, water quality.
Oh, I guess that's me again. Yeah, I was out of town since May 15th, so we didn't have a meeting. As far as I know, does anybody else know, Sarah? Rita? Okay.
Okay. Energy Commission.
We talked about what we talked about tonight, the anaerobic digester proposal. That was basically the entire meeting.
Okay. Parks.
Hi, we met on Tuesday. We only had one item. We actually leased Mary Beth Doyle Park from the county, and we renewed that contract.
Okay. Council.
I think sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I think maybe Councilmember Dish can help me, but I think since the last time that this group met, we passed incentives, sustainability incentives. Was that, Lisa, is that news or is that not news?
I don't remember when.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry if I've reported this before, but recently, within the last council meeting or two, we passed a package, budget allocation and agreement with the company that's going to help us run the incentives program for things like increasing the efficiency of your home, air source heat pumps, e-bikes, things like that. And so look forward to hopefully that's going to be rolling out this summer. That's the main sustainability thing that I can think of that council has done recently.
Okay, report for chair. Thanks last month for everyone for voting for myself as chair and Steve for vice chair. I appreciate the vote of confidence. Next meeting will be an in-person meeting. It's going to be mostly a working session meeting. Aaron, is there going to be a Zoom option for people that are out of town, or do you know yet?
I think in theory we can do hybrid meetings. Yes.
So
I need to make sure I choose the correct room.
Yeah. So the hybrid is for people who are out of town and not for people who are in town who are trying to not come. So I know we'll have at least one person who will be well out of the state. So that's what the hybrid's for. The primary focus will be discussing what the work groups are going to be working on during the year, what we should be doing with the Environmental Commission, what are our priorities for the year, what agenda topics do we want to talk about, what questions do we have for the presenters, things like that. So that'll be the general focus of that meeting. And I will say, in tonight's presentation with Brett Leonard, I thought there was a really good conversation from a number of different commissioners asking questions. So I think that helps make for better meetings also. And that's all I have. Let's see. Our next scheduled meeting is July 25th. And public commentary, I think, is next.
Sorry, I missed.
else?
Did we get Planning Commission update? If there was one.
We don't have anybody from the Planning Commission. We don't have a Planning Commission rep.
Right.
It's true.
Council member Dish has been reporting out for us.
Yeah. And I cannot remember anything. I'm sorry, I did not prepare to do this. I was out canvassing before this meeting. Nothing is, well, we did, Planning Commission did discuss the TC1 Washtenaw rezoning. And it poses a couple of puzzles. So where we might need to, where we're not putting TC1 fully along the full length of the corridor, because it's just that it's a very oddly configured corridor, it turns out. But that will have another discussion, so we haven't voted on it yet. So oh no, yes, we did. Sorry, no. It's coming to council. It's coming to council. Sorry about that. Yeah, we did that.
And I guess I did just want to say, because the in-person meeting is different, like there's flexibility around the time. If 7 p.m. works, because that's already on your calendar, that's great. But we have a lot of flexibility to do a working session. So I guess let me know, or we could chat about it now, or let me know at a later time. But we're assuming we're all good to go at 7 p.m. unless we hear otherwise.
Does anybody have a problem starting the meeting at 7 p.m.?
On what day?
July
It's
25th.
on, yeah, our next,
Regular
like,
meeting. Okay.
And
Regular time.
City Hall
just,
somewhere?
yeah,
Where?
the location is where what I was going to ask.
Oh,
it's
Where
going to
will
be
we
at
meet?
City Hall. I currently have 2 rooms reserved. I need to do some reconnaissance to see. I haven't actually seen them, so I just need to make sure before I decide. But it'll be in City Hall.
Very good. Thank you.
so I think public comment is next. So public comment is welcome and will be via telephone only. To speak at public comment, call 888-788-0099. Enter meeting ID 962-0336-6543. This information is available on the published agenda, public notices section of the city website, and broadcast of this meeting on CTN channel 16, AT&T channel 99, and online at a2gov.org/watch TV. Do we have anybody that called in, Aaron?
We do not.
Okay. Is there anything else people want to talk about, or should we have a motion to adjourn?
So I usually do a staff update, but I did submit a written update, so you can look at that. But I did it's basically a reminder that the neighborhood swap is on June 29th on Saturday at Pioneer High School. Sounds really cool. I can't make it, but sounds like a really unique and great event where you can come and bring things to swap, or which is not necessary, but you can also find other great things. So the goal being not to put things in the landfill or to divert items from the landfill. And then from Environmental Services, there was a state-hosted public hearing on June 20th regarding the draft discharge permit for Gelman. And so the city did make verbal comments on that, which was kind of a reiteration of written comments that we had already been submitted. So that is also in my notes. Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. Commissioner Gruber?
I just want to share some brief news about the University of Michigan. The Regents just approved Shalonda Baker to be our Vice Provost of Sustainability and Climate Change, might be the title. And that's probably of interest to a lot of you. So if you want to check that out and follow it, I'm excited because she will be overseeing the Graham Institute, which is where I'm working. So that's some news in this space at the University of Michigan.
What's her background, Bridget?
She was at the DOE. Anya, you probably know a lot more about this. She was doing some really cool energy equity work at DOE, appointed, working with Biden's office. So she's got a lot of experience in external engagement and working with communities, and so she's going to bring that to the table, which I think is really exciting. So hopefully that means more service and more community engagement that U of M will do in the sustainability and climate space. And
quickly, she was Tony, or she has been Tony Ream's boss, and a lot of people know Tony Reams, and I think he was probably instrumental in convincing her to consider the position.
Thank you.
Anything else? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay. That's seconded by Chris Graham. So thanks. See everybody next month.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.